It's a privilege to be asked to speak, and I know everyone in this room's got stories to share, and so thanks to Blair and the Landcare Network. So this is a case study of one of our projects linked under the Gondwana Link program. I'd first like to acknowledge that this is very much a collaborative program. Natural Resource Management, Lotteries West, Conservation Council of Western Australia, Gondwana Link, the Gillamai Centre of Cranbrook, South Coast NRM, and the Australian Government through its NLP programs have all played a major role. So, and certainly want to also thank my colleagues in Green Skills, especially Tony Patterson, and colleagues in state and partner organisations. So the case study is based on Balijup Farm. We've got Richard Hordegger, one of the owners, here today, which is great. Very supportive three-generation farming family. It's a 920 hectare property, more than 550 hectares of which are lakes and wetlands and reforestation areas, and 140 odd hectares which is sharecropped, which pays for the farm. We were fortunate to work with the farming family in fencing the remnant veg over a number of years from about 2010, and then realised that part of the property could function as a sanctuary, and we've already heard today quite a number of projects based on feral fencing. So this provided an opportunity for a community group to introduce this idea for this section of Gondwana Link, and then use citizen science along the way both for a whole lot of community education benefits, but also to evaluate whether it works or not. It's in Gondwana Link, the central zone of Gondwana Link, and it does fall under a community action plan, which guides our work for that part of Gondwana Link. Where it is, it's halfway between the Stirling Range National Park and the Mount Roe National Park on the south coast near Cranbrook and Tennyden. So a very strategic property, and in fact we had an honours student from Curtin who helped us develop a methodology for assessing properties for conservation investment, and Balijup came up top. So the idea is very much to increase the abundance of the small vertebrates, particularly marsupials that have been eliminated across that agricultural fragmented landscape by excluding foxes and cats by fencing. It's not a panacea. Of course we want to solve the problem on a landscape scale, but it helps to fine-tune ideas at a very local level by having feral-proof fencing. So a couple of years of planning and covenanting and getting it ready for presentation to philanthropics and lotteries. So it's a 110 hectare section of the farm in the corner, along with programs though for the rest of the property as well, particularly relating to wetlands. Establishing the sanctuary, very much lotteries was prepared to invest capital works. They did want to see quite a lot of justification. We were very fortunate to have a couple of collaborations. One was with Balijup Prison Farm nearby, so major work camp team and also conservation volunteers, and local fencing contractors who we helped develop their capacity in feral-proof fencing. It's the whole thing I see as a learning exercise and capacity building for us on the Great Southern about feral, these sanctuaries, pruning, fencing, but then comes the big day of opening the sanctuary with our local MLA and lots of local landholders. So a lot of interest in the idea of bringing back creatures that were known to be in there but have long since been absent in the local rural knowledge. And of course, part of the crucial part is having support for volunteers, recognition and for the volunteers that are so critical to this program. Now, while the Green Army teams were around, we did use them very strategically and usefully. I personally think that there's lots of merit in it. Of course, they shouldn't divert from other land care investments, but on the South Coast, Green Army teams have been socially and environmentally tremendously valuable. So setting up the framework both for the sanctuary and the broader property, we set our conservation objectives. This included trying to measure the benefit of bringing back soil perturbing marsupials like bandicoots for forest ecology, setting up indicators for success, both environmental ones like re-establishment of successful populations, but also community and education objectives, collecting data, often with very limited resources, but using Conservation Council expertise, local wildlife expertise, and volunteer programs to do strategic monitoring, as well as ongoing ones that we could manage ourselves, reporting, and often through our website, and sharing that knowledge. So part of it, partly because Balijup was Dieback free, is setting up quite strict protocols for Dieback hygiene, and also using motion detecting cameras as a low-cost option for seeing what's going on. Now, part of the challenge of using Dieback strict hygiene is that it wouldn't be the type of ecotourism property that has generated income for sanctuaries elsewhere in Australia and overseas. More on that a bit later. So we were able to, we think, successfully eliminate foxes and cats within a few months of closing the fence, and we were able to reintroduce Quenda or southern brown bandicoots from the Albany area. And this shows some of the typical images from cameras that we have on site since then. Also, possums were reintroduced to Balijup, and their numbers have also been, we've kept an eye on them, and they certainly seem to have grown within the sanctuary in particular. Yeah, so part of the citizen science program has been about having monitoring programs where we focus on what fauna is there. And here we have the two main species, the Quenda and the brush-tailed possums, that have been the focus so far. In some ways, it's about capacity building with these species that are not critically threatened, more suited to the type of community or NGO group that we are. In that contrast, for example, to the much more ambitious sanctuary programs, for example, of AWC at Mount Gibson. What is fascinating about doing monitoring and citizen science alongside a project like this is the questions that come, far more questions come up than one's able to answer, and that's part of the joy of actually learning about a real ecosystem on an operational scale project. So here we've started to ask questions: what are the impacts of native predators on fauna, whether it's goannas, the Rosenberg's heath monitor, or owls, or other reptiles. And that's been, one of those interesting questions that we bear in mind in trying to understand what's happening within the fenced enclosure. Now, what has been welcoming is we haven't spotted foxes or cats within the enclosure, but certainly often do notice them walking around the outside of the fence. And there's a fox to the left there. Can everyone see that fox on the outside? So certainly, especially in farming areas where farmers are very reluctant to do too much baiting because they have working dogs, it's very hard to get levels of foxes and cats down to a level where you could start to be reintroducing animals back. So that's one of the challenges of thinking about innovative ways of tackling our feral predator problems. Here's some more monitoring using cameras, which that's of both possums and Quenda. And this illustrates some of our weekends with Conservation Council and volunteers. There's Nick and I think Marin as well, measuring up some of the Quenda. So it provides a lot of experience for a range of different people, both locals, university students, and NRM practitioners. So it wouldn't be possible without volunteers. That there's always a substantial cost of running these monitoring weekends. For example, they would cost at least $1,200 a day. However, without volunteers, it would be far more. We have volunteers from the local area, but also the farming family and its networks, and especially it's particularly valuable for uni students. We've got many that come through our environmental and biology programs, and these types of projects, as with at Chingarup and elsewhere in Gondwana Link, provide really valuable and passion-inspiring experience for our uni students to get more hands-on knowledge and see the practical challenges of doing this sort of work in the field. We also have a range of school visits, not a lot though, because we don't have the capacity, but there are several a year, and it's wonderful to see the enthusiasm of teachers and the schools in visiting sites like this, which is essentially an experiment in trying to understand how our forest has changed in response to feral animals and agricultural fragmentation. In the last year and a half, we've also managed to, in quite an unexpected way, start to develop partnerships with local Noongar groups, and it's been wonderful to bring, this is through South Coast NRM's Cultural Connections, but also a local foundation in Mount Barker, bring back Noongar elders, youth leaders and youth to back onto country, and as with other parts of Gondwana Link, I think very heartwarming and important connection, because these are really totemic animals, things like the goanna, the kada, and so forth. A second, so besides a strong focus on Quenda, we've starting to look at Phascogales and firstly monitoring to see whether they are on Balijup, and we've been. So this again is a non-critically endangered species, but it doesn't appear to be on Balijup through putting out nesting boxes and monitoring those. So it's sort of our next cab off the rank for developing a program of relocating them to Balijup. Again, lots of community partnerships. There's the Denmark Men's Shed, who've made now probably well over 25 of these Phascogale boxes. And again, a partnership with a sector of the community that learns about biodiversity. We've also had Noongar involvement in installing the nesting boxes. So again, a great link for them to come back onto Budja and share their knowledge, but also learn new skills themselves. Here we've got one of the extended family, Joe Porter, who's a wildlife ecologist, often working with the zoo, and we now doing monitoring on farms near the Stirlings to see if they've got Phascogale populations that might be suitable for applying for a plan to reintroduce them to Balijup. And again, working with local farmers, and it's building that district-wide knowledge that the Balijup is there, that we've got need to focus on how we tackle the problem of feral foxes and cats, and at the same time enlisting their support in bushland conservation. Besides the mammal monitoring, there's also bush surveys, and it's using the methodology Nick talked about earlier. Two species in particular that we think will be useful for monitoring the health of the return of a mature woodland, like the fence sanctuary, is the yellow robin and the rufous tree creeper. Both, we hope monitoring will show that their numbers are benefit from the having a fence and managed sanctuary. So challenges and opportunities. Yeah, I'm one of those people that love visiting New Zealand, and it's been over the last 25 years seeing what's happening there. They started with offshore islands and pioneered some pretty amazing results in bringing back native bird and seabird populations onto offshore islands by eradicating pests. And then in more recent years, there's been a whole spate of community-based sanctuaries, often costing millions of dollars. So, for example, Orokonui near Dunedin has a visitor centre. It's got a program of several tens of thousands of visitors a year. It's a multi-million-dollar budget. And they've been successful in reintroducing a suite of kiwi and other New Zealand species that haven't been found in Otago for well over 100 years. So, very inspiring to see both their funding models. They've gone for a lot of business sponsorship. They've gone for, again, the connections with philanthropics. The scale of their volunteer involvement in monitoring programs is inspiring, and also to see how they do it. and the expertise that they share and the collaborative programs with the Department of Conservation there. So, and that's a small example of the benefit of travelling to other countries. And New Zealand is definitely on the way now through these sanctuary and offshore programs to coming up with a nationwide or regional model for pest management. Some great targets they're setting and research programs to reach those. So great plug there for going overseas and even volunteering on such projects to get a handle on how they tackle it. Another type of challenge is how does one keep mainly volunteer program citizen science going over a period of several years? It's now been 3 years since we've established this sanctuary project, and it isn't an easy one. So it's a combination of thinking about support from philanthropics and grants, and the state NRM's been critical, but the lack of longer-term confirmed funding is a real setback. So I think that's where we've got to get imaginative with things like crowdfunding. We've tried several particularly chuffed websites for Balijup and other Gondwana Link projects, still not cracking significant support, but that's probably because we need to develop our own marketing skills in that area of how we can start tapping into a broader funding base. I mean, our last speaker was, that type of combining it with a much broader regenerative agricultural focus and investment on that scale sounds, it's very exciting, and we need to be developing that model. So that's one type of challenge. Another one is building up local expertise. So how we can keep building the capacity of the local community to be involved in, for example, monitoring the fence and so forth. A challenge that we face on this one is that the homestead, which has been available for the last 6 years, is no longer available as a field study centre. It's been tenanted out. So that then sets up the logistical challenge of where do we base our teams when we're doing work on the property. But so it's a journey, and the journey is always as valuable as any end goal. And lots of lessons to learn, and in general, and lots of unanswered questions. Questions that are raised that need to shape the direction of the project as it goes forward. I think what's valuable about this project is that it represents a fence project that's much cheaper than what I've seen overseas or with other ones. But however, it won't be a panacea for a landscape scale protection of our rare and endangered marsupials. But it does give insights, and it's certainly got community education benefits. Finally, just a plug for being part of a bigger program. So the fact that this is under the umbrella of a landscape program, and it's a vision like Gondwana Link, helps to both give it focus and keep it in perspective, as well as have a network to share and get feedback from. In visiting New Zealand, the thing about these sanctuaries is that they provide halos where the protected bird species that have bred up within the sanctuaries are spreading out. So you visit Wellington today, and there's native birds have come back into the city from a protected sanctuary on the outskirts. So is that the type of potential we can see of these hotspots of feral predator control? Could that be the seeds or the hotspot places from which we begin the slow process of returning the full range of lost species from those landscapes? Thank you.